Hey everyone, welcome to the Indie Coach Podcast. I am Ron Newcomb, your host, and I have here with me my new friend James, who is a fellow storytelling sojourner. And I just we're connected on LinkedIn. I liked what I was reading and seeing, and heard him also, and wanted to get him on the podcast because I thought what he was saying was really resonating. Seems really timely. A lot of us are thinking a little bit outside the box. And so I wanted to get James on. So, James, if you could kind of maybe tee us up a little bit and just talk a little bit about your background, kind of how you got here, what qualifies guys like us to talk about storytelling.
Awesome. Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I don't know. Yeah. So I go way back. Stories have always defined my life, right? There's two, yeah, even all way back in the day in high school, like, or even before high school, there's like two books that define my life. And one of them sent me to seminary school. It was called God Smuggler. And the other one was Wizard at Earthsea, which opened up my love of fiction and seeing that was the first time I ever saw myself in a protagonist. And so those kind of both set my path. But yeah, it's been interesting because it's one thing has led to another. So uh, while going through college, I got into sales and found that stories were the things that let me connect to people across the spectrum, right? Whether they were an entrepreneur, whether they worked in government, whether they worked in, finance or eventually into publishing, and now more recently in film. We're all storytellers, I think, at a certain level. And the difference that I tell with people is the last, decade and a half of my professional career has been working with a lot of storytellers and training storytellers in various mediums. And one of the things I said, the difference between a professional and a novice is not necessarily the level of passion or even the level of talent, right? It's the who are you creating for? Are you creating for yourself or for an audience? And that seems like a subtle distinction, but it's a massive change in how you approach the work. And I see so many people get stuck because they're constantly creating for themselves and then going, nobody gets my vision, right? As where those that start with an audience and they go, how do I get my story in front of these people in a way that they'll be able to hear it and see themselves in it, right? And so when we say start from the audience, so, a lot of times, it, I come back to, well, like we just need to understand that you can tell your story in a lot of different ways and a lot of different mediums, right? And again, going back to what qualifies is like I've now told stories across a lot of different formats and mediums at a lot of different levels. And like I said, at the end of the day, the difference between those that make it and those that don't has nothing to do with all the stuff we talk about. It comes down to who am I doing this for? And then will I do it consistently over time until I win? Like those are the two things. And so I don't know if that qualifies me for anything other than to say I've seen a lot of things that didn't work and a few things that did. So I just double down on those.
Yeah. I mean, I think anybody with any sense of maturity knows that you learn way more from your failures. I saw a really good interview with Tom Brady, and he was talking about how he doesn't really remember the wins so much. And here he is, like the winningest, professional football player. And here he is talking about all the things that when he blew it and all the, running through his
Mm.
head constantly of failures. And I've had my setbacks, man. I had one recently. I launched a board game that looked like it was just going to crush and really thought it was going to. And then, because it's a crowdfunding space, when we put it out there and flipped the switch,
Hmm.
didn't come like we thought they were going to come running. We had done a really good pre-campaign, but I do find that there is a lot of value and worth in the shots that we take, and it doesn't always work out. And I do believe, to your point, there is a tenacity that must be had by the storyteller slash entrepreneur to to keep going. And it is in those moments. And yet I also recognize that it's okay also not to keep going. It's
Yeah.
okay. not that it wipes you out, but maybe you pivot and there's a different change. I've really been looking at taking my screenplays and turning them into novels, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. I've done comics, like I said, board games, miniatures. You and I also have, I went to seminary myself. So, we have that in common. But talk to me a little bit about the Storie Foundation and what was the kind of origin story, if you will, of that, and what problem were you all aiming to solve when you launched it?
Yeah. Yeah. So Story Foundation, like so many other things, it came out of trying to solve our own problems. And so I coming out of publishing, so I started in publishing working for another company where I was very blessed to work with the campaigns for a lot of thought leaders and um, influencers and things like that. And um, took some of that knowledge and put it into a an automated ghostwriting software that was really for the average person, as it were, that wanted to capture grandma's story or their own story for whatever. It didn't have the 60 to $150,000 it took to do what we were doing at the other company, and so we scaled that relatively quickly, and did a good job with it. But as things as you know, with a business, like I ended up doing all the stuff that I didn't want to do, and I didn't have any time left for all the fun stuff, like actually working with the, clients or actually being involved in the storytelling. And so I found an opportunity to exit that, and that bought me some time, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So that's how I got into film, was just I had a client friend who was a producer, and they said, you're basically just a producer without the title. Why don't you try it? So I was like, well, I don't need credit or money, so let's give this a try for a year. And it was a great learning experience, and they really opened my eyes to a lot of things in the business, how it worked. And as a fan, I was able to finally start understanding like the trickle down of like why do the things I see on screen happening, right? And so being able to go through that at different levels to kind of understand was great. So anyway, we did that. I did that for a while, and then the things that kind of kept happening over and over again was that again, I'm coming in from a slightly different perspective. I get that from the average person, but I kept seeing people that were stuck with the same issues. Like, oh, I have this script for 10, 15 years. I keep showing it to everybody. Maybe if I just keep doing that, eventually one person will give me like $7 million and I can make this script, right? And I'm like, well, first of all, this is nonsense. This is a nonsense way of like pitching, going through life. Like that's number one. But number two is like, okay, let's play this out. And this is what I started doing with people. And I realized very quickly most people don't. Like most producers will just ignore you, right? Which I get, like they're just sick of it. But I was like, I'm learning. I want to like well, maybe I'm missing something here. So I would just start going through the exercises with them that I would go through with like an entrepreneur. And I said, well, okay, hold on, let's back up. I said, well, first of all, let's say that I had and was inclined to give you $7 million for this. Where do you want me to put it, right? Like, you don't have a bank account, you don't have like any of this stuff set up. Like, the IRS is gonna be all over you're like, what am I gonna do, right? Like, this is nonsense. You're not prepared for the money. But let's put that aside. Let's say that you were. What are you gonna do with it? Like, who's the first, like, what's the very first thing you're buying? How much is it gonna cost? What is it getting you? How long is it gonna take to get it? Like, these are just questions I want to understand as an investor. And they're like, well, I'd probably call Joe Smo and ask them blah 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 about this. And I'm like, so you don't need money, bro. You need a phone. Do you not have a phone? Right? Like, and then it's somewhere around there they start realizing, oh, it's a slightly different level of the game that you're asking about. Then I just thought I had a good script and I just turned it in. It's like, no, that's an employee. So, and then this is what I finally started telling people. I'm like, look, you have this idea of you have the studio model and the indie model. And it's like, no, it's the same model in every industry. You have an employee model and you have an entrepreneur model. You just call it something different and you don't realize the game you're playing when you get into it. So you have all these people that are in the studio model that are waiting for their big break, not understanding why nobody's looking for them because it's like you're an employee. Why would they ever promote you out of their system? That doesn't help them, right? And then you go to the indie model and you go, why doesn't anybody want to support me? Because you're a lone island, right? Like that's the entrepreneurs, that's every entrepreneur in every industry. You're alone until you're not, right? Like until you've done all of the work and taken away all of the risk, nobody's interested,
Mhm.
right? And so what we've seen work in publishing and then music, and I think the that film is just kind of catching up is what we call a hybrid model, or in other industries, it's called a reverse franchise model, which is essentially Story Foundation. we've done this in a number of models. We've just launched it in our self-service model. But essentially it provides the infrastructure, the framework, and the fractionalized access to the tools while allowing the individual, what we call microstudio, which is the IP owner. So it's usually 1 to 5 creatives that own and created the IP. They operate all the creative they own and do on their own, but all the business processes are based on the 80% of the business side that is the same for every studio, right? The same tools, the same frameworks, the same setup, right? And so then we can all learn together, not as competitors, but as different, because we're all kind of going after the same goal, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's where we're at right now. That's what we're building. Yeah, plug this in. Um,
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about you've been helping storytellers, and you already mentioned these micro studios. What is a micro studio kind of in your definition? And why is
yeah.
that? Why would that be an advantageous thing for me as the indie filmmaker to know about, maybe execute on?
Yeah, so there's a few layers to it, but the simplest way to think about it is again, if you think about like a reverse franchise or so if you think about like a franchise with like Domino's, right? You buy into their brand, right? And that gets you access to blah 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 blah. So it's going to be discounted supplies, but it also gets you marketing, but all these other things. And so it's kind of this, but the trade-off is you give up your identity, all right? So the idea that what we're going with is like, well, we want to provide the same level of support, but we don't want you to give up your identity. So we provide the same level, but the identity still belongs with each individual
Hmm.
IP owner. So the reason that's important, and we call it a micro studio, the reason that's important is it allows you to keep a holistic view of your story and not think of it as a film or a book or a game and get locked into, oh, it has to look this way, right? And so the way I tell people a lot of times, especially those coming out of the industry, in fact, your audience is probably better suited for something like this because what we find is a lot of people that are coming out of the industry, they still see themselves as a writer or a director or a key, or whatever their title was, they got them wherever they're at. So it's hard for them to put on that owner's mentality and understand that, like, look, maybe you do have a $7 million film in you, but you're not bankable yet. So we need to back up and we need to start working some incremental steps to get there. And as a business owner, if you can put that hat on, then you can see it as, okay, I have this story and I could tell this parts of the story as a book, and this part is a graphic novel, and this part is an audio book, and this part is an audio drama, right? Or a podcast or whatever. And this part I can do through shorts, and this part I can do a micro drama. And then all of these things over the course of say 18 months, if I stack them and I'm having an ongoing conversation with my audience and I'm delegating out as I go and I'm collaborating with other creatives to build in their levels of genius. So I'm not trying to do everything on my own. I don't have to own everything, but I can oversee everything. And if, again, it's an owner's mentality versus an employee mentality. But once you put that hat on and you start extrapolating out, it unlocks a lot more organic opportunities and you can take advantage and move relatively quickly. And the example we use for this is James Bond, right? Before it got bought by Amazon recently, was just kind of the premier example of this, where it's a family that owns an IP that is global and world renowned. It reinvents itself each generation, but it's also spawned games and books and board games and events, live action events, right? And movies and all these other and everything else, right? So and same thing with other examples that like Star Wars or anything. I tell people they're not films, they're not anything, they're IP, right? And so many people in the beginning, they think they have a film, right? And that's all they're focused on is I need my $10 million for the film. And it's like, if that's all you're ever chasing, you'll never get it. But if you have a story and you can turn that story into a brand and you can protect that brand with the frameworks, the structured frameworks that we know work at kind of an industry level, then yeah, maybe you do have a film. And you probably have a lot of other stuff too that over time will be worth a lot more than that one film ever would be.
Yeah, I definitely like that. I totally buy into that. Back in the day, there used to be a term called transmedia. I don't know if
Hmm.
you recall that, but that
Yep.
was the thinking of, the board game, the book, the comic. And I heard this one time and it made me kind of check myself and be like, is this real? Do I really believe that? And the answer is yes. And that is, we are in the business of exploiting IP.
That's it.
And that sounds, because of that word exploitation, it's almost like I don't want to take that in, but it is true. We're trying to maximize the output of our IP. It isn't just the film, it's the story. If you let it be, it's what Hollywood does. It's what's We all knock on the studio system in Hollywood and how bad they fail in XYZ. We never praise them for what they do really well. They're just overusing the IP play right now. And we all know that because they're trying to de-risk. And so they have no risk because films, and at least in their lane, have gotten so expensive, which is why indies are so important still. But we still are in the business of trying to maximize financial output, exploiting that IP. I have a Ronism, and it's money is not a problem, it's the problem. And
Mm.
I've been trying to solve that. And I love the buzzword that I also capture and take that you use, iterative. I have this thing called Concept Compass, and it's all about iterating on your idea. Like your first draft is never going to be
Right.
one you should go to delivery with. We all love the brain trust, right, from Pixar and how they iterate. That's what they did well, and that's what they cracked the code of. But in facing all these things, financing, distribution, rights, and all this stuff, how would you, what would you say or recommend or do for a filmmaker that really had a strong opportunity for IP? You read their story, let's say it's a sci-fi, and you're like, oh my gosh, I see the game, I see the comic. What would you kind of tell them to do? Any thoughts or advice on how you would help a IP person?
So, I mean, the answer to every question is it depends. And so, and this is no different, right? So, I mean, really, it does depend on where you're starting from, right? Like, do you have an audience, or yes or no? If you have an audience, then you're starting from a very different point from somebody who doesn't. Do you have a name in the back or an industry? Have you made a film before, right? Like, that's a huge question. Because if you've made a film before, you're far less risky than if you haven't, right? So the steps in between to de-risk are less. So it's like that's what I'm saying. It really depends. So when you say you have a filmmaker, if that means somebody who's done a film and they're looking to kind of level up, then I would say what you're essentially doing is the same in our framework is kind of the same steps. You might already have some of the middle steps kind of partially already done. And so essentially what we do is we want to see um, it's not just iterative, it's also we want to see a kind of an elevation at each phase, right? So we start with, okay, can you build some type of a audience, a seed audience around a written expression of your story, right? So usually that means like a short book, but not always, right? It can be variations on that. Some people are like, no, I'm gonna be super artsy and I'm gonna do it as like a living written whatever. It's like but generally it's some kind of a book, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, can you get 100 people to buy your book, right? Because that 100 book, people in a niche Amazon genre, you can get a bestseller status on your book.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, now you have an asset. All right. It may not be worth a whole lot because maybe you're selling your book for $1 a piece, but that's okay. You're not trying to make money off your book. You're trying to build an audience,
Yeah.
right?
You validate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's we call it proof of potential. That's all we call it. We want proof of potential, right? Because then it's like, okay, cool. So now you've done this. You've sold 100 copies of your $1 book to people that aren't your mom, right? That's a good sign. So then can you capture 20% of those into a newsletter, right? And so, okay, cool. Like, so I mean, these aren't like rocket science deal. Like this is every go-to-market every startup's ever done, right? It's just being applied to your product is your story and it can be you want different products to serve audiences at different levels of the market, right? And so that's all we're doing is we're kind of slotting it up. And so anyway, so again, we're just looking to prove concept and then move to the next. So then what's next is like, okay, can we get one neighborhood brand partner for the next book, right? hey, I'm doing a sequel. I've got some momentum. It costs, $500 for a cover. Would you sponsor that, Mr. So and so business? And what are we really doing here? Is it not about the money? What am I really testing? Are you willing to go to a business owner and say, are you willing to back my IP? Because if you can't ask for $500 now, you're not going to be able to ask for $5 million later, right? We need to build that skill and we need to start small. And so it's what we say is we build the IP. So it's the studio, the storyteller, and the story itself all at the same time. You just kind of have to you want to level them all up at the same time. And so I would say again, it depends on where you are. If you're further along, some of this you might be able to skip ahead, but essentially, yeah, no, you want to validate the IP. Once you do that, move it to some type of an audio expression. Again, audio drama, audio book, something like that. Can you reach 1,000 people at that stage? You can? Awesome. Now let's move to, again, let's repeat the process. Can we get somebody to back it financially? Can we get talent to back it? That's the other area. Can we get now talent to back the next one, right? At some level that's appropriate. Cool. So now what are we doing? We're just testing these muscles at higher and higher levels. Okay, so now can we do a visual representation? Maybe this is a YouTube video, maybe it's a short, maybe it's it could be some type of a animated proxy, something like that. Again, it's just what are we trying to do? We're trying to show proof of potential. Can we get 10,000 views on that? Right. And can we capture a percentage of them saying, yeah, I would be interested in seeing more of this story. Right. And so it looks different. So that's why we say they're milestones. They're not check marks, right? Because everyone's going to look a little bit different depending on the storyteller and depending on the audience. But that's what makes it fun, right? Like the 80%'s the same, but the 20%'s where all the magic is. And that's the part you want to do anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, the story is the fun part. That is the sizzle.
Hmm.
That is why we're doing it. And you definitely have to have, so with Concept Compass, the thing that I put together, it's all about validation. And you have to validate your idea. Film is like the final bastion of like holding on to like, no, I'm gonna go just get the 7 million. Just give me the seven
Right.
million bucks. I'll show you that it's gonna be awesome. It's like, in what world do people think that that even exists? It's we hear, oh, well, it's a visual medium, and they're like, well, I can't really recruit people now because what when I get the movie though, then I'll be able to really recruit people. It's like, people are going to decide on your film from a trailer, right?
Hmm.
From a trailer, a minute and a half to 2 minute trailer, they're going to decide whether or not they're going to drop $20 to go put a butt in seats on a Friday night at a theater. And if you can't convince them now, then
Hmm.
you're not going to be able to convince them then. And that is a hard reality. I think a lot of filmmakers just don't want to swallow. And I appreciate your desire to try to help them iterate really on that, to kind of walk the steps. Like, don't shoot for the $7 million. Let's just start with a story, you know?
Hmm.
Is it, and then also, by the way, I bet you they'll also be getting feedback from that story. Like, I don't, that it was cool, but if you did this, and again, we all love the idea of the brain trust, but I see few filmmakers in particular, we don't, our stories are protected, man. We don't want people coming at us, so we have to have an openness. So I do want to drop the one of the bomb questions on you, and again, not trying to corner you or put you in a position, but obviously it's kind of the word of the day, so I like talking about it. Where do you see, obviously, AI, Web3, decentralized technologies, with kind of where we're at in the landscape? And I know this is hard to predict, James. I won't hold you to anything, I promise. But if you could look around the corner, what do you think might be coming around the corner too? So AI, Web3, decentralization. I see a lot of people trying to solve all these. I myself am knee deep in it. So I'd love to get your kind of sensibilities of where you see the landscape.
Yeah, man. So yeah, let me absolutely go into that. But before I do, I want to give one little piece of context on what you said before about the trailers, because there's one that's such a great opportunity for filmmakers that do decide to really take over the own reins, is because there's not only is there an opportunity to stop giving away the entire movie in the trailer, which is something we've been doing the last 10 years for some reason. So it's like I don't even need to see the damn thing
Oh,
anymore. Excuse me. But the other thing is you have an opportunity to create this layered experience, right? And so here's my segue into AI. What I mean by layered experience, and this is something we've been experimenting with at on a few different projects, right, is being able to use these technologies not to replace the artist, but to enhance what a solo artist can do, right? And so a lot of times that means taking something that giving the artist the time and the focus to build the whatever the long form version or the bigger version is, um, and then using the technology to split it out into quote unquote content. And so to pause here, I make a distinction. I think this distinction is going to get worse, quote unquote, or bigger as technology continues to improve. But essentially, I make a distinction between art and content. And I don't think that they're mutually exclusive in that they're oppositional, right? But they are different in nature and in purpose. And so a lot of times I see us confusing them. And so studios are really, to your earlier point, are really, really, really good at producing content, right? They're really good at creating and distributing content. They're really, really, really bad at developing art, right? And so what I see as an opportunity is for those independent artists that and again, this isn't anything new. Like the last 10 years, what, anywhere from 40 to 60% of the award-winning, Oscars and Emmys and all, those were all independents that got bought after the fact, right? And so this is just kind of a democratization, as it were, where now that this technology exists, anybody who is a storyteller and takes it seriously, right? Because that's the trade-off. Now that anybody can do it, everybody thinks they can do it, right? Most people, all they're going to do is type in a few prompts, put it on the internet, and go, nobody likes my story. Okay, so that's your competition. So if that's all you're going to do, you're not going to win, right? Like there, you still have to have an artistic vision. But if you were before, if you were limited because you didn't know how to write in the right form, it's like, it doesn't matter anymore. You can dictate it, right? And you can have it. Yeah, I didn't know how to draw. It's okay. All you need to do is get close. Can you get a proxy and then get it close enough that you could have an artist come in and elevate that proxy up, right? That's all you're trying to do is can you get to an MVP? That's all you got to, and now the ability to do that across all of the million verticals that you need to be able to do that to run a quote unquote studio have all been lowered to the point where literally one person with the right systems and the right focus can do that, right? Like, is it easier to, yeah, obviously, but it is now literally possible, and we've already seen success stories of that, right? And so that's part of like what AI and these automated systems is like I think they're going to continue to make um m- force more holistic, kind of well-rounded storytellers. And that's why we use that term specifically in our own work, right? Is because that's where it's heading. It's like again, you're not going to be limited to a particular skill or a format. That would be too limiting for the future market. And then kind of I guess the second thing to piggyback off of that would be um oh shoot, it doesn't matter. I was probably just gonna go off on a tangent anyway. There was something I was gonna say though about
Web3, AI, decentralized.
well, yeah, so it's interesting. So Web3, I don't know. I don't see that changing things as much as people think it will on the surface, right? I do see it potentially over time changing some of the back end stuff. So for example, like there's a platform we use that automates all the contracts and stuff and kind of tracks that. So as people sign on, it's not just, oh, so and so's attached. It's like, no, there's a chain of evidence to show so and so signed, when they signed, time stamped, IP location, all that. Now it's attached to the project with everybody else, so it's all public and transparent, right? All of that came out of the quote unquote Web3 movement, right? And so we're seeing that trickle into quote unquote, the more traditional industries. And so in that sense, I think it's kind of made its mark, right? I don't know that Web3 as a industry is ever going to be a thing. I think it was more of a movement that we're going to see disperse into other things at different levels. And you talk about like blockchain and stuff, and it's like, well, our grandkids use it for transactions on day to day, maybe, but we might be post monetary by that point just as much. Like to me, I could go either way. In the immediate future, is it going to be really good for banks and organizations, and potentially, like larger studios like Amazon and stuff to, um, to commoditize, novel assets and then move large amounts of money across, international borders, which would could facilitate all different kinds of, to keep it limited to our industry, all different types of new productions and things like that. Yeah, absolutely. Like, sure. Over time. Um, but for the average individual film, and like, I don't think it's going to change it as much as you think. In
Yeah.
fact, I would almost argue what we're seeing is the opposite, is because the bigger studios are having this increased push for just owning the content and then algorithming it out, right? Like we just put a computer on it. So this chase for profits has pushed all the artists out. Um, and so like now we have this sea of underemployed artists, right? And they need a vehicle. And so this is where we kind of pat ourselves on the back a little bit, is like, yeah, we saw this coming 3 years ago. That's why we started testing then, because we knew that this was going to happen. And what's interesting is all the studios, you burned all your bridges or you sold out to the other ones. And it's like, but now you're wondering why your billion-dollar IPs aren't making money. And it's like because there's no novelty, and the things that 20% that kept them fresh and all that, like you've just alienated all those across the entire industry. You said, nah, screw y'all, we're just gonna replace you with, oh wait, that didn't work. You guys want to come back? And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that same technology that you use to replace us, we can use to replace you.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, I have another podcast set up for actually tomorrow, and it's these young guys that are fresh out of college, man. And they had a question. This young man was tenacious. He just jumped on, found me on LinkedIn, was like, "Hey, can I do a call with you?" And the stuff that was coming out of his mouth was just blowing me away. I was like, "Hey, bud, would you mind if I like interviewed you on my podcast?" Because
That's awesome.
it was very much kind of like the lay of the land that you just described, is that we're not beholden to anybody anymore. They're the YouTube generation. I mean, I mean, these guys are, 21, 22. So, I mean, they grew up with YouTube as their primary A-list stars are YouTubers, like my kids. That's all they've known, which is, scary in and of itself. But I'm very interested to kind of hear what he thinks, because I've been saying it for a while, and it's now truer than ever. He who owns the audience wins the day. I mean, it's always kind of been that way, but now you can actually take a bit of the market share as an indie. I mean, that's why I'm also encouraging people not to just think of your one IP. Think of it
Right.
more as A24 or Bloomhouse or Neon, or, you know, think differently in the sense of entrepreneurially. You would never go off and say, I've got one widget and that's all we're ever going to sell, and yet that's what we do. I've got this one film and I've got the one idea, and I want you to give me $7 million. And an investor, because I know I've been in the meetings, they're like, what? You're going to do one thing and now I get one bite at the apple. And if you blow it, I'm done. Right. I'm out. Like, they are not interested. They're getting 10x and all this stuff with AI and data centers and real estate, and they've got 20 bites at the apple. Um, where do you where do you see indies blowing it?
Well, I mean, I think you're hitting on part of it, right? Is trying to play the studio game at an indie level, right? Like there's a joke with all the studio producers that we do, because we do, I mean, again, I'm not anti-studio. I just think there's a place
Yeah,
for them, right?
right.
And but we deliberately don't work in that space for a few reasons, but one of them is it's just kind of a crappy, it's just a bad, it's just bad. Like, I don't know what to say. Like it's not well run. It's a lot of secrecy. It's a lot of backdoor stuff, and it's just kind of the nature of it, right? So that's all of that set aside. So, but the thing is, we try to apply those lessons when we go, thinking that other industries operate in a similar way. And so then when you show up with, oh, hey, I have this really cool idea, and I don't really want to give you a lot of transparency into what I'm going to do, and it's kind of fly by. It's like,
Yeah.
and then real investors in real industries, to your point, look at that and it looks like you're wishy-washy, right? It looks like you haven't done your homework. It looks like you're living in fantasy world, right? And the thing is again, if you're coming from the outside looking in, you go, well, isn't that how it's done in the studio? It's like, well, no, it's not. It's what it is Bob and Julie already know each other, and Bob goes, "Hey, do you want to return or do you want a loss this year? Which one do you want?" Right? Because Sally, who I forgot what names I used, but Sally is already worth 10 gazillion dollars, right? And they just need to put their money somewhere so that they get more of it back, or they can write off the money they lost on one of their real investments, right? And movies are great for that at that level, right? Studio movies are great for that because the money goes in, no one knows what the hell happened to it, and then it comes back out to me later, right? And again, if you're already in that network and it's a very, very small network, you're probably were fine with that for a long time because the money kept coming back because we had the guaranteed minimums and all the stuff to protect the initial investors. And the old saying was as long as it doesn't as long as you don't lose money, you'll get another shot, right?
Yeah,
That was always the saying.
it was. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not anymore, right? Like because they started losing money
Yeah.
because that system doesn't work in this current market, right?
Yeah. I mean, look at just this weekend, DiCaprio's recent film. They're looking at
Oh my gosh.
$200 million loss. I got to be honest with you. I don't know what the heck the movie's about, and I'm a movie nut, and I want to like movies, and I'm very not anti studio, but I mean I have no idea what that movie's about, and they're talking a critically acclaimed and maybe Oscars, and it's a $200 million loss. I'm beside myself. I don't know why the studios keep stepping on landmines, and that one should have been like a no brainer to me.
Okay, so this is worth the paper that it's printed on, right? But I mean, the conversations that we're getting are essentially this. Look, I know I got 2 years left in this role. I'm gonna milk the heck out of it e- as a studio green light guy, right? Like, because I'm not gonna do anything that's gonna get me fired in the meantime.
No.
Right. And I'm just going to make as much money off it as I can because I know it's all going down anyway. Who cares?
Yeah.
And the only place you're seeing people actually try is still the indies. And that's why I said, but the other cool thing, but like again, there's an opportunity there because that's the exciting thing is 200 million, you to your point, like you set yourself up for failure because you went in so deep as where your 7 to 10 million range, right? Smaller crew, they're more invested, right? They're passionate. And also because you're going after a smaller audience for a smaller amount of you can still get your 10 to 30x returns with a much smaller box office, a much smaller campaign, right? So even as an investor, I would rather do that all day than a 200 million with you know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. Like, I forgot the guy that said it, but a young man won an Oscar and he got up and he took his opportunity. I don't know if you recall this, and he said, "Hey, we should do more $10 million films.
Yeah.
And if we do 10 million, we should do more 5 million. If we do 5 million, we should do more." He just kept it, obviously his point was $200 million loss. In movies, you and I, if we had a green light, like I don't need your two. All I need, I mean, a million, frankly, is a lot of money still. So that I can make that work. But who wouldn't want more money? What do I know?
Oh, well,
Uh,
if you will though, like because they go back to the question, where do I see people blow it? And this is you just hit on it, right? Is when they're asking for it doesn't matter what the money is, 50,000, 50 million, 500 million, doesn't matter. If you can justify it,
yeah,
it really doesn't matter if the ROI is provable, right? The number doesn't matter. But the problem is they don't start with, here's what I need, right? They don't start with any of the foundation. This is the story, this is the
yeah,
audience, this is the,
yeah,
what do? They go, oh, in my
yeah,
head, my film looks
yeah.
like this, it costs
Exactly what
this,
they do.
and that's what it should be.
They because we know about comps. So, oh well, that film did this. So that's what I
That's
need.
it.
Like, why do you need that? And they're like, I don't know. It's like, do you have the actor you want? And do you know how much they cost? Do you know what their rate is? Do you have them attached or anything? Well, no.
Yeah.
Um, well, hey, brother, what are you working on now that excites you? And how can people support or collaborate with you?
Yeah, so the thing that we're most excited about is taking our milestone process and moving it to a self-service. So we're doing that. We're using the school platform to kind of give it a shot until we build it out. But we're really excited about that. You could check it out. I'm on LinkedIn, just James Timberlake, but you can also look up storyfoundation.org is kind of our main site, and you can link to it from there.
Outstanding, man. Well, I definitely appreciate the time and thank you all for watching and listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment so James and I know anybody's out there. For God's sake, we all need help too. It does help the channel also. And I just want to say how much I appreciate what you're doing. I love the outside of the box thinking. That's how I found you and, went down the rabbit hole myself. I found your school channel. I went on the site. So definitely appreciate the time today. But I believe we are good to conclude our discussion with James Timberlake. And remember, nothing is wasted.